This week it was announced and later confirmed during Brian Daboll's Wednesday press conference that Jaxson Dart will be the starting quarterback of the New York Giants for the foreseeable future, raising the question of is it too early for Jaxson Dart to be starting for the New York Giants? And the reality of the situation is yes, it is way too early to be starting Jaxson Dart on the New York Giants. And it's because he hasn't done anything to prove that he is worth starting, that he is ready to start. You don't go from project to prodigy in a 3 week span running scout team. It just doesn't happen that way. If Jaxson Dart was the guy, if he was better than Russell Wilson, if he was ready to start, then why didn't he start week one? Well, it's because he wasn't ready. And like I said, you don't all of a sudden in 3 weeks become a starter by killing it during the scout team. You become a starter because, well, maybe the quarterback in front of you, Russell Wilson, struggles mightily and loses his job just because he's been so bad at football. And that's exactly what happened. In the first 3 weeks of the season, 3 starts for Russell Wilson, he's had 8 red zone trips. And of those 8 red zone trips, there was 8 red zone trips he's had, I should say, where the Giants settled for field goals or went four and out. It happened multiple times against Dallas, multiple times against Washington, and obviously multiple times against Kansas City, with the clip that went viral being where he threw an intentional grounding pass the 5 yard line, scrambled, threw another batting completion, and then threw the ball away on fourth and goal. He lost a job. He just played bad football. And the locker room was not really feeling the vibes of what's going on. So what did Brian Daboll do? Knowing that his team's on fire, he pulled the last card he could possibly pull, which was starting Jaxson Dart at quarterback, this young QB, to try and say to John Mara, listen, we have something here now. But to me, you don't keep your job by prematurely starting a young quarterback. That's only going to hurt you, which has hurt many, many teams over many years, many years. Um, and what do those teams have in common? Well, they're all unstable organizations. Since 2020, there's been 18 first round quarterbacks selected, excluding Cam Ward and Jaxson Dart. And of those 18 quarterbacks that were selected in the first round since 2020, 14 of them started week four or earlier. So where Jaxson Dart is starting, or earlier in their rookie season. And of those quarterbacks, 8 of them fell flat on their face. Bryce Young, Caleb Williams, Anthony Richardson, Zach Wilson, Kenny Pickett, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, and Mac Jones. What do all those quarterbacks have in common? Well, the organizations. And what do all those organizations have in common? Unstable, unstable, bad, bad, bad. You have the Jets, you have the Bears, you have the Panthers, Jacksonville, it's the Steelers. And why? Why are the Steelers on there? Well, yeah, they've been known for their winning habits, but it's been in spite of their quarterback play. They've been unable to develop quarterbacks. And so they all have something in common, which is the inability to just function as an organization. The quarterbacks that did have success, well, look where they went. Look who was surrounding them. Bo Nix, he went to the Broncos. Okay, a stable organization that had Peyton Manning, John Elway, Sean Payton, a championship-winning coach, watching over Bo Nix, helping him. Jaden Daniels, Dan Quinn, Cliff Kingsbury, arguably one of the brightest minds, not even arguably, one of the brightest minds in offense, and Cliff Kingsbury, and a coach in Dan Quinn who's gone to the Super Bowl, who was a head coach of the Atlanta Falcons when they went to the Super Bowl. The Bengals being that anomaly, in my opinion, with Joe Burrow. But what's the difference between Joe Burrow and literally every quarterback I mentioned, including Jack Dart in the situation? He was a veteran. Joe Burrow was a 24-year-old rookie. Okay, he had ample levels of success, and he was just developed. Okay, he was 24 years old, and when you're 24 years old, yes, I do expect more from you week one, especially when you're the number one overall pick, the conscious number one overall pick. So what we're seeing is the Giants doing something that all the bad and unstable organizations constantly do, which is get in their own way, do things prematurely, do things the wrong way. And it's just another item to go on this long list of problems that are holding back the Giants. By starting Jaxson Dart, you're only going to stunt his growth, all right? And it's going to hold him back. And the Giants are just falling into place with all the other bad organizations as to why they struggle. It's because they do things when they shouldn't do them, even though, at least to the public eye, it's common sense not to do those things at all. On top of that, it's just, frankly, and I said it earlier, it's a desperate move by Brian Daboll to try and keep his job. And what this is also a reflection of is another problem with the New York Giants, which is not knowing when to call it quits. I understand John Mara saying, "Hey, I want to give this team a long leash, this head coach, this GM, one more year to really prove it to me, to show me that they are who they say they are." But what the Giants should have done, and I would say hindsight is 2020, but we all knew this well before the season. What they should have done was cut ties with Brian Daboll. He has shown no one the ability to coach and be a leader in the locker room of the New York Giants. Since he went to the divisional round with Daniel Jones, where they defeated the Minnesota Vikings in the wild card, they've been nothing short but unimpressive, having one of the worst records in football for year after year after year and struggling. His inability to win games with Daniel Jones, his inability to lead the locker room was just, it's a problem after problem after problem. And to me, you can give him a long leash as long as you want until he makes a boneheaded move or a boneheaded decision, which is what happened after the bye week of November 22nd with Daniel Jones and that whole debacle. The Giants were getting ready to play Tampa. They said we're benching Daniel Jones. He's no longer the guy. Kind of put in the what's the expression? um, the writing's on the wall, right? The writing was on the wall in that moment that Jones was going to be ultimately cut. And so what did Daboll do? He put Jones at scout team safety, huh? And then what happened after in that game? The Giants got absolutely obliterated with Tommy DeVito at quarterback. But this is what is the disaster class of it all. Connor Hughes had a conversation with him. He's been covering the Giants, the Jets for many years. Okay, he covers them for SNY. And in our conversation, he told me, quote, or not quote, this is not verbatim, but he told me essentially that in all his years of covering football, all his years of covering the Giants and the Jets, this is the Giants locker room after that loss was the most ridiculous locker room he's ever been a part of. He said that it was, one player over here spewing about how bad maybe something's happening, or another player over here having their whole other little debacle about what's going on. And so he said, it sounded like to me at least it was one of the worst locker rooms he's been a part of. And obviously, you guys can go back and listen to the interview I had with him during that time span around November 24th with the whole Giants decision. But right then and there, when you see that Daboll can't control the locker room, when you see that Daboll is embarrassing a quarterback who was admired by many people in the organization and the fan base. Sure, Daniel Jones may not have been the quarterback people have wanted, or he didn't work out the way people wanted it to work out. But when you embarrass a QB like that and lose a locker room, you shouldn't be the one with the job still. So what this is happening is it's showing ultimately two reasons as to why the Giants for the past decade have been such an abysmal franchise. It's their inability to make the smart moves, to make the decisions that smart organizations do. It's not keeping a head coach who can't control the locker room and be a leader, and it's not starting quarterback too early on in their rookie season. It only backfires. It only hurts you. Look what the Eagles did. All right, the last thing I'll mention is we talk about how, well, hey, the locker room right now, Dexter Lawrence may not want to be there. Uh, they're trying to find a way to win. Well, what you do is you be a leader in the locker room, A, and you start Jameis Winston, B. Okay, the Eagles, they went through all sorts of problems in 2020, right? Carson Wentz was 3-8-1 in his first 12 games with the Philadelphia Eagles. He was a disaster. And they had this quarterback in Jalen Hurts from Oklahoma, the second round pick, who was just kind of hanging around. And somebody who, might as well give him a shot, right? But they waited, they waited. They went through all the bumps and bruises with Carson Wentz. And then when Jalen Hurts was finally ready, they threw him out there and they had him play the last 3 games of the season as a starter. And guess what ended up happening? Well, the Eagles are Super Bowl champions. They've gone to the Super Bowl multiple times with Jalen Hurts, and things are looking pretty darn good in Philadelphia, in a market that is just as noisy, if not more noisy, than New York when it comes to football, when it comes to sports. So all in all, this is a bad decision to start Jaxson Dart because you don't go from prospect to prodigy overnight. It doesn't happen.